Ya estamos en directo, Sergio. Buenas tardes.
Hola,
Primero que nada, gracias por aceptar nuestra invitación. Sabemos lo ocupada que está tu agenda y la gran cantidad de... En directo, Sergio. Buenas tardes.
hola.
Primero que nada, sí, la cantidad ¿cómo se llama? De trabajo y de asignaciones, de viajes, etcétera, y que has sacado este tiempo para nosotros. De verdad que lo agradecemos muchísimo. Voy a presentarte un momento como corresponde, ¿no? El doctor Sergio Bryton es asesor de las Naciones Unidas de la Unión Europea en Seguridad, Narcotráfico y Terrorismo. Tiene un doctorado en Ciencias y Ingeniería Náutica por la Universidad Politécnica de Cataluña, en el cual tuve el honor de participar como codirector hace unos años y que fue una tesis exitosa y una tesis que ha dado mucho trabajo posterior. Sergio también ha sido comandante, si no me equivoco, capitán de navío, que me corrija, de la Armada Portuguesa, con lo cual una gran trayectoria también en el mundo militar. Y actualmente está en Blinko, The Blue Innovation Company, y en Euroocean de Managing Partner, que es donde también desempeña sus funciones de asesoría en seguridad y en todos los temas que vamos a tocar el día de hoy. La conferencia hemos acordado hacerla en inglés, como corresponde. La asignatura tiene que tener un pedacito en inglés. Con lo cual, welcome, doctor Sergio. The floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Jesús. Buenas tardes a todos. Yo hablo español y entonces si quieren hacer las preguntas más tarde, lo pueden hacer en español sin cualquier problema. Pero voy a hacer la presentación en inglés. Por un lado es más fácil para mí porque son temas que utilizo en el día a día y como comentaba hace poco con el profesor Jesús, el inglés es la lengua de trabajo en esa área. Y entonces muchas veces es difícil traducir esos temas para nuestras lenguas nativas. Y cuando hablamos con otros países, con personas de otros países, hablamos en inglés y los términos nacionales se quedan en el territorio y no tienen mucha utilidad y también normalmente los temas en inglés son importados para las lenguas nativas. Entonces, el inglés es una lengua muy importante en ese dominio marítimo, pero también de seguridad marítima. Y por eso voy a hacer la presentación en inglés y también para contribuir para que vosotros empiecen a asimilar esos temas ya en la lengua donde son hablados. Entonces, por eso voy a hacer la presentación en inglés, por esas razones. Es
Sergio,
un
entonces
honor
sí,
para mí, perdón.
les recordaremos una vez más a los estudiantes que al final haremos las preguntas al final para no interrumpirte y que nos dejen las preguntas en el chat. Pueden dejarlas en castellano o en inglés y yo te las trasladaré.
Perfecto, sí, claro. Y entonces también me gustaría agradecer al doctor Jesús Marín. Es un honor estar aquí y recibir ese convite y hablar para vosotros y poder contribuir para vuestra formación y quizá un día de esos nos encontramos en unos puertos por ahí alrededor del mundo por donde normalmente trabajo. Entonces, sin más, voy a empezar. La mía idea es hacer una presentación por más o menos 90 minutos. No quiero masacrarvos mucho, pero hay temas que me gustaría hablar con más profundidad y después abriremos a preguntas de vuestra parte. No tengan ningún problema en hacer preguntas. Eso es una conversación que me gustaría tener con vosotros. Entonces, es ahora o nunca. Tienen que hacer preguntas si quieren hablar, si no, yo me voy. Y no sé cuándo nos volveremos a ver. Entonces no tomen eso como una lección muy formal donde no pueden interagir, ¿no? Me gustaría mucho de escucharos y saber lo que piensan y lo que sienten sobre eso, porque de lo que les voy a hablar será más o menos vuestra realidad en mucho poco tiempo. Y entonces tienen aquí la oportunidad de hablar con una persona que viene haciendo eso hace muchos años. Entonces aprovechen eh, los conocimientos, pero también la oportunidad para intercambiar formas de pensar y ideas que tengan dudas. Aquí no hay respuestas ciertas o erradas y nadie va a censurarlos por lo que piensan. Entonces aquí es un espacio libre para hablarnos de ese tema, claro. Entonces voy a empezar y cambio para inglés. So today, this lecture is on drug trafficking and terrorism, and especially the effects on international port and maritime system. So this is a very important topic nowadays, increasingly important, especially the topic of drug trafficking, but also terrorism. And I will be speaking in detail about that. But I don't know if you have the notion, but over the last 8 years, the drugs incoming to Europe, namely from South America, but not only, by through maritime paths and through shipping, namely, and inside containers, has increased exponentially. And this brings important impacts into the economy and into the society in the European Union, but of course on the other countries, on the origin countries as well, because these countries, if there is demand from the European side, there will be the need to produce on their side. So drug trafficking is like any other business, but not a legal business. And so if there is demand, there must be supply. And so when, if on the one hand we are pressured because more consumption exists and more import exists, those countries are, the origin countries are also under pressure, and their societies and their economy to produce more. And so this is a vicious circle that concerns everyone, concerns us that are in Europe, but also concerns those that are, for example, in South America. And so this is not good for anyone. So I will share my slides now, and therefore this was just a bit of an introduction. And terrorism, you know, nowadays we have been listening to what is going on. It's not exactly terrorism what is going on in the Red Sea, but is close to that. And for example, what is going on in other parts of the world, for example, related with submarine cables and pipelines. There are many motivations, and so it's there are many things going on in the maritime domain that could not be formally considered terrorism, but are very closed, very close. And so you need to be aware of these things and how they impact the maritime ecosystem. And so this is what I'm going to talk about today. So let me just find it. Okay. So I will be talking about the blue economy, the security and development nexus. I will be talking to you about, in general, the maritime crimes so that you have an idea of which are the main maritime crimes and what are the latest development in each of them. I will be talking about threats to shipping. I will be talking about cocaine trafficking in particular. I'll be talking about socioeconomic impacts. I will be talking about standards, compliance, and ways to address these problems. I will be talking about the protection of critical infrastructures, especially when it comes to ports and port facilities, which are very important assets in all this context that I'm talking. And I will be talking about also something very important, which is the virtual or cyber dimension, because normally we speak about the physical world, but you will see, and I hope that you understand, that the virtual world or the cyber world is increasingly important for all these things, both on the side of the attackers or on the side of the criminals, but also for the side of the law enforcement And last but not least, very important for those involved in the supply chain. So the cyber world is very, very important to all these. And so I will be speaking about that. And then I will be talking a bit about mitigation measures so that you have an idea of how these problems can be addressed. I will not say that they can be resolved because these are not easy problems to solve, but at least you know how you can address and try to mitigate the risks that come from these problems. So the first thing I would like to speak to you is about the blue economy. So the blue economy, you probably have heard this in other places. The blue economy is something that we want to achieve, and the blue economy is the broader concept within which the shipping business is inserted. So the shipping is one area of the blue economy, but there are more areas. So in broad terms, what we would like is to have a good blue economy, that is, economy related to the ocean or based on the ocean. And here comes the first thing that I would like to point out is the difficulty to define what the blue economy is. Of course, I can define it in broad terms and say the blue economy are all economic activities that are based on or result from activities at sea or from products or the ecosystem or activities at sea, and also indirect activities, for example, that products and services that contribute to the activities at sea. For example, the ports activity, for example, ship repairs, for example, insurance companies, all these are not at sea, but are developing products and services that contribute to what is going on at sea. So indirectly, they are also part of the blue economy. And so this difference between this difficulty to identify which are the sectors and the companies and the activities that are inside the blue economy and outside the blue economy is not straightforward and is not the same, for example, in all European Union countries, and even less if we speak about all the countries in the world. So this blue economy is a concept that everybody understands, and I will speak about why it is important soon, but everybody can understand in broad terms what the blue economy is. But when we go down to the details, there are many, many challenges. And as someone said, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So if you don't know exactly what is inside and outside the blue economy, it becomes very difficult to manage it. And likewise, if you want to compare, for example, the blue economy of Spain with the blue economy of France, if they have different definitions, if they are measuring different things, although they are speaking about the blue economy, it will be very hard to say that one is better than the other. So just to let you know that in broad terms, everybody knows what the blue economy is. In the details, there are many differences. So comparison is not easy. And assessing it is not easy too. Why is it important to measure it? It is important to manage it and to define policies. For example, one of the things that we have been talking about for the last years related to shipping is, for example, decarbonization. Decarbonization is a very trending topic. So to be able to do right policies for decarbonization, we need to understand what are the impacts related with decarbonization and with carbonization, and so that we can make good policies that make the blue economy improve as a whole. And so we need to understand and know in detail how the shipping business is inserted in the blue economy and its relationships with other sectors. And if we start doing policies for decarbonization, how those policies will affect the blue economy as a whole, not only shipping. So this is very important that we know exactly what we are talking about. And also, another challenge to the blue economy is the lack of data, because this is not a traditional economic sector. Although we are speaking about the blue economy, let's say, over the last 20 years, more or less, um, there is not yet many data in many of the sectors of the blue economy. And so, for example, understanding international statistics what is blue economy and what is not is a very challenging task. In some countries, more easy than others. So, still in the topic of the blue economy, there are two types of activities that the European Commission defined. There are marine-based activities, which are those that are undertaken in the ocean, in the sea, and in the coastal areas. So they are there in the marine environment. And these include, for example, fisheries, aquaculture, offshore oil and gas, offshore wind energy, ocean energy, desalination, shipping and maritime transport, marine coastal tourism. These are what they call the marine-based activities. And then there are other activities which are the marine-related activities. And these use products and or produce products and services for the ocean and marine-based activities. So marine-based and marine-related. These marine-related, for example, include seafood processing, marine biotechnology, shipbuilding and repair, port activities, maritime communication, maritime equipment, maritime insurance, and maritime surveillance. So these are the first definition that I would like you to understand is the difference between what is marine-based and what is marine-related. And then there are another pair of concepts which are in the European Union, because in other regions, for example, in Latin America and the Caribbean, can be something different. But in what I'm telling you is the doctrine of the European Commission, okay? So in other regions of the world, you might find slightly different definitions. But in any case, what is important is that you understand the concepts. And if you understand the concepts, then you can use other taxonomies, okay? So in the European Union, another important idea is that between the established sectors and the emerging sectors. And for example, established sectors are sectors like coastal tourism, maritime transport, port activities, those activities related with marine resources, shipbuilding and repair, marine non-living resources, marine renewable energy. These are the established sectors, and they are established because they are there for a long time. There is innovation, of course, but they are very well established in the society, in the economy. Everybody knows what they are. For example, if you go to a bank, and this is an interesting issue, and you ask a loan for doing some aquaculture, for doing some aquaculture facility, they will know. Or if you want to make a loan for buying a fishing boat, a bank will know what you are talking about, and so they can understand the risks of the business and give you money or not. But if you are working on emerging sectors, which are, for example, blue biotechnology or desalination, these are not established sectors, these are emerging sectors. And so the society is adapting to these sectors. And so, for example, if you go to a bank and you ask for money to build a desalination facility, it is very likely that they don't know what you are talking about, and they don't have benchmarks, and they don't know what are the risks associated to this business. And so it will be difficult for them to give you money for such a business. So that's one of the reasons why it is important to understand what are emerging sectors, new ones, new ideas, from those that are established and very well consolidated. So for you to have an idea, the established sectors in the European Union employ close to 3.6 million people. For you to have an idea, the European Union has around 500 million persons. So this is more or less 1% of the population is associated to the established sectors and generates around 620 billion euros in turnover and 171 billion in gross value added. These are numbers for 2021. And so they contribute around 1.3% to the EU 27 economy. This is important. So the blue economy is not a huge economy, but it is a very important economy, especially if you consider that around 80% of the population in the world, and the EU is not an exception, lives on the coastline. So someone that works in the maritime industry. It is either a father or a mother or a relative or a sister or a brother. And so the blue economy does not have a very big economic impact overall. 1.3% in the gross value added is a small percentage. And this is on average for the EU. For example, in Portugal is around 4%. I don't know in other countries, but so these numbers value, of course, 1.3 is on average. In some countries, it is more important than others, but also keep in mind the impact that this can have in the livelihoods, because again, 80% of the population is on the coastline. So everything that happens in the coastline is important for people that live there. That means is important for 80% of the population. So even if it is not returning value, that activity of the blue economy is having impact on the lives of these people, on the environment, on the society. So the blue economy goes well beyond the importance of the blue economy, goes well beyond the impact, the financial impact. It goes into the lives of people and also the environment. Climate change, I mentioned a moment ago, decarbonization are very important topics that we need to consider. And so the blue economy, for example, the noise produced by offshore facilities that hampers the marine environment and so on. So all these things, what happens in the blue economy does not stay in the blue economy. It's normally the saying is the other way around. No, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. So this is the other way around. What happens in the blue economy does not stay in the blue economy. So this is what I'd like to share with you about the blue economy. And of course, one last remark is that the blue economy is not only the private companies. All the public agents, organizations that facilitate, define policies, fund, etc., are an important player of the blue economy. Universities, research institutes, whether on the marine environment, whether on marine engineering, are very important for innovation, for example. And then we have, last but not least, all the law enforcement side. So the judiciary police, the navies, the coast guards, all these entities, maritime police, depending on the organization of the country, customs, all these entities are very important for the blue economy, and the way they work will make the blue economy more easy or not. For example, if one police agent or organization in one port terminal decides to stop every container before entering the ship um, for drug trafficking reasons, and means that they will do a pre-embarkation inspection of 100%, and I have seen in the world situations like this. And if I tell you that any container can take up to 10 minutes, which is fairly quick if you think that these guys have to put a dog inside, open the container, bring some boxes out, inspect the boxes randomly, go through the container with scanners, X-ray scanners, and go with the dog and find for drugs, etc. If we think that they do every container on average in 10 minutes, if you are putting, I don't know, 500 containers times 5 is 5,000 minutes. Okay, so this means that is a long time that the ship will spend on the pier, in addition to what it already needs to spend there. So as you can imagine, this is a huge financial impact on the economy of the country, but also on the price of the goods, because all this will be reflected across the supply chain, and the end user will pay a higher price because it is more costly to export, for example, bananas, to export bananas because they are paying more to the port. And so the difference has to be reflected on the price of the products, of course. So the end user will pay more for the bananas than it would not pay. So this is represents an increase of price throughout the whole supply chain. And this is just an example of how a law enforcement directive can affect all the shipping business from South America to Europe. Okay. And this is a very simple example of how these different agents are important and how all these cross-cuts our realities. Now, still here. Yeah, I think this is what I'd like to tell you at this point. Now, what I'd like to talk to you about now is related to what I was speaking before, is the topic of the nexus between security and development. And the first thing that I'd like to tell you is that one and the other, they are like the left hand and the right hand, okay, or like one coin, one side and the other side of the coin. So there is no coin with only one side. Every coin has two sides. And security and development, they are two parts of the same coin. And let me explain you this idea. So can you imagine doing your life, the life that you do today? You go to school, you go out to a bar, to a restaurant. Probably your parents have their own small business. They have their groceries, a grocery store, for example. And they are doing their lives, their daily lives, no problem. You are bringing, if you have kids, you are bringing your kids to school, and then you are bringing them back, and you can leave them at school. Can you imagine this in a place where there was people shooting on the streets, for example, or where there were bombs falling, or where there were terrorist attacks? It would be very, very hard to live your normal lives without security. So in the end of the day, you need security to have the conditions for development, for living your normal lives. This, I will not enter in details, but I'm not sure if you are familiar with the pyramid of Maslow and the pyramid of Maslow. Maslow was a psychologist that designed this pyramid. Is a pyramid of that incorporates the values for persons, and at the bottom of the pyramid are things like basic stuff like eating, doing hygiene, and stuff like that. And upper in the value chain are other things like being motivated or being able to do business. So the value, this is how things are valued to the human person. And in the base of the pyramid is security, because without security, you cannot do any of the rest. Without security, you cannot go out. Imagine people in a war living, for example, we have the unfortunately the example of Ukraine. Can you imagine those people in Kiev being bombed every day, trying to find food, trying to do their hygiene, trying to do their basic things, trying to get money to pay for things which price has gone sky high because asset goods are not coming into the country. So it's a mess. The society is a mess. So security is essential for our normal lives, for our development, to go to school, to eat, etc. But the other way around is also true. In many cases, there is lack of security because there is no development, because the population is in very dire circumstances. Think, for example, in Somalia, and this is why I put this photo here. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the problem of piracy in Somalia. The problem of piracy in Somalia is a problem that goes back, let's say, I don't know, maybe 10 years, more or less, 25, 2015. Let me think. Uh, 20, yeah, around this 10, 15 years. Okay. And the problem probably you have never heard. I don't know how old are you and if you have ever studied this, but if you have never listened about this, let me brief you. So in Somalia, many years ago, there was Somalia, if you don't know, is a very poor country in the northeast of Africa, in the Horn of Africa, as they call it, that is facing to the Red Sea and to the on into that area, into all that area that is very critical to a famous choke point between the Mediterranean and the Pacific. And so this sorry, and the Indian Ocean. And so this choke point is very important, and the Somalian is a country where there is war and where there are terrorists, Al Qaeda, and where there is hunger, and so these people have very, very difficult circumstances. And so at some point, some years ago, some of them realized that there were a lot of merchant vessels going through the Red Sea, and so they decided that they would be better off if they started attacking these vessels. And so the problem that they created in the region was so big that for some years, and is still there, the European Union and other countries like China, Japan, Russia created a multinational force to protect the vessels that were passing in the region, because these pirates were attacking the region and were making the ships, so they were hijacking the ships, and then they were asking for huge ransoms, and for the cargo, for the ships, and for the crew. And so this was a way that they found to find some money to live, some huge amounts of money that, of course, was also related to criminality in the country and terrorism, etc. But this was just to give you an example of how the lack of development and the need and the despair of some populations forces them to go down the route of criminality. And so they started this activity. And an important idea associated to this is that to overcome this, you have to address the root causes. You have to help developing the country by creating health conditions, by creating education conditions, by creating security conditions. If you just put a naval force in front of Somalia, in this case, and you stop the pirates from attacking the ships, you can stop the problem while you are there. But once you leave the area, the root cause of the problem, which was population very poor, without health, influenced by criminal organizations, or hostage or manipulated by criminal organizations, will rapidly go back to crime. And this is what happened in Somalia. So for many years, there was piracy, then there was this multinational force, and then this multinational force started fading away because it was not financially sustainable for all these countries around the world to have a naval force in the region. And so they have to start pulling their ships back and assigning them to other missions. and then piracy started climbing again. Why? Because the root problem was not addressed, and this applies to any phenomena that you can think about. If you are sick and you go to the doctor and he realizes that you have a fever, he can give you something for the fever, but is curing the symptom, is not curing the disease. So he has to dig deeper and figure out what is your actual disease, and only when he stops, when he manages to find what is the disease, then he can cure you, and then you will no longer have fever. So piracy, in this case that I told you, was a symptom of something more problematic. And it's not by giving you paracetamol that you will solve this bigger problem that is the root of that problem. So this nexus security development is very important to be considered. And for example, if now we bring this to your reality, many problems that we find today with lack of security around ports are related to lack of development around ports, and are related with lack of security around ports. So at a smaller scale, we have there a security development nexus. And it's important to understand this so that the mayors of the cities can do good policies, and those involved in the maritime environment can participate in those policies and understand why those policies are important to avoid bigger problems. This is what I wanted to tell you. And so the main criticism is that often you try to solve security problems with security solutions when you need both. You need security solutions, which are the paracetamol, but you also need to do analysis and understand better the problem, and development to actually cure the problem that is underlying the symptoms. And this is the major criticism. And this happens in many parts of the world. It happened in the migration crisis in 2010 from Africa to the European Union, if you remember. I mean, of course, you can put a naval force in front of the north of Africa, and people will not pass because there are warships there. But the first thing is to understand why are these people leaving from Africa to Europe. And only if we work with Africans and try to understand this and try to avoid that people start coming into Europe, we will be able to solve the problem. There are, in some countries, I will not say the name, they are building walls. So they are building walls, but the walls are the paracetamol. They will not stop people from trying to come into the countries, because there are other reasons behind that. And it's those reasons that need to be solved. So maritime crimes. So there are several maritime crimes that I will talk to you about in broad terms. One of them is oil pollution. So in the year 2023, there were around over 700 tons around the world of oil spill. Oil spill, as you know, not only has the immediate impact in the ocean, but it has also a long-lasting impact that can affect ecosystems and can affect tourism, for example, if the oil spill goes into shore. This happened, for example, in the northwest of Spain many years ago, when there was a big pollution from a ship that contaminated a huge area in the northwest of Spain, in Galicia. And it affected the ecosystems, but also the economy, especially tourism, while the situation was not resolved, and this takes a long time to resolve. So the most well-known event was called the Deepwater case, the Deepwater Horizon, which happened in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, and basically there was a disaster of an oil drilling rig. And it is estimated by the US government that around 5 million barrels of oil were released, which is more or less 700,000 tons that were released to the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. This was a big problem. It is the biggest problem related to oil pollution, 2010. But pollution is frequent, but it's not a big problem in itself. Especially in the EU and around the EU waters, it is very much monitored, for example, by the European Maritime Safety Agency, which one of its missions is exactly to monitor pollution in European waters. It was the main reason why the EMSA was developed was for this. Now EMSA has many other roles, but this was one of the main roles. And today EMSA has very sophisticated systems based on satellites, for example. They have vessels for addressing pollution at sea scattered throughout Europe, permanently available to intervene in case there is a serious pollution incident in European waters. And so today, the risk is very well mitigated, and we don't suffer much from oil pollution. But oil pollution continues to exist. The thing is that the risk is mitigated. Okay. I told you already that also the evolution of vessels, for example, vessels with double hull, made that pollution is not so harmful today. So vessels being damaged and releasing the oil is not so easy after they started using double hull architectures. So a lot has been done to prevent this. So today we are not so affected by this, but it still exists in large numbers, but the impact is very little. The other crime I want to tell you about is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. This is a very important crime because basically what happens is that you will see on this figure, you will see some vessels of a Chinese fleet escorted by a U.S. Coast Guard vessel. Not escorted, but followed by a U.S. Coast Guard vessel. And you see vessels like this by the dozens in several areas of the world. And I have seen them, for example, in Africa, in Guinea-Bissau. I have seen them in Ecuador, for example, in Galapagos. I have not seen them, but there are reports that they operate, for example, in between the border of Uruguay, Brazil, and Argentina. It's a big problem for them, and in other parts of the world. So IUU fishing is a huge problem for many reasons. First of all, they take away the fish from the ocean without any rules. And this makes that fishing is no longer sustainable because you are fishing more than you should. And if you are fishing more than you should, it means that fish will no longer be available. So you need to give some time for fish to grow. And this is a very simple way of putting this, but just for you to understand. So they fish no matter what, and they take as much fish as they can without following the rules. So this depletes the fishing resources. The other thing is the impact on the livelihoods of fishermen, because fishermen live from fish and from fisheries, but they follow the rules. So if these guys are, let's put it like this, stealing all the fish without following any rules, when the legitimate fishermen go to sea, they don't have any more fish, or they have much less fish to fish. And so they are out of business. And with them, their families and their income is lost. So IUU fishing is a problem for the environment, is a problem for the fishing community, and is also a problem for our society, because then this fish that they fish has to be sold somewhere. And you will be eating fish in Spain or Portugal or France that was caught illegally. And because it's outside the rules, you have no idea how it was stored, how it was transported, if it is healthy or not. So there are many other problems that can come from illegal fishing to affect the final consumers. So this is a huge problem that is increasing around the world, and it's a crime. It's considered a maritime crime. And so I wanted to tell you about this. And this is related to ports in a way, not container kind of ports, but fishing ports. So this is important for you to understand and to know about. Normally, fishing is also related with many other criminal activities like drug trafficking, weapons trafficking. A lot of this happens together. A lot of these crimes happen together with fishing and fishing vessels and so on. So they are not isolated. Okay. Another crime that I'd like to tell you about is, let me just check. Sorry. I still want to talk to you about people trafficking and firearms trafficking. So, people trafficking, first, let's distinguish between people trafficking and migrant smuggling. So migrant smuggling is essentially an economic activity. So let's say that I'm an African, I want to work in Europe because I like the way of living in Europe and I think in my country I have no future. So I want to go there and I want to earn money. Okay. So what do I do? Because of course, if I try to enter the border legally, they will not allow me to enter for a number of reasons. Or I go as a tourist, or if I don't go as a tourist, if I try to sneak in, I will not, I will be detected and I will be arrested and deported back to my country. So, because I will be illegal. So how do I do this? Well, what I can do is talk to a criminal or a criminal organization and pay them to bring me, let's say, to Spain, um, undetected. So this means that they put me inside a container or a vessel or a truck or whatever. I pay these guys and they make me uh, cross the border undetected. And then once I'm there, they let me go, hopefully, and then I will do whatever I think I will be doing. So this is migrant smuggling. Okay, this is a criminal activity with economic profit as the main motivation. People trafficking is something else. People trafficking is related to the exploitation and slavery, for example, of people. People trafficking is about is so migrant smuggling is happens with the consent of the person. Normally, it is the person that asks to be smuggled, whereas people trafficking is against the will or of the person, or in many cases, a situation of migrant smuggling can be converted into people trafficking. For example, if I am a lady and I want to go from one country to the other, then I can be kidnapped in the process of the smuggling and turned into prostitution, for example. This happens quite a lot. And so then I'm no longer acting under my will. I'm being forced and exploited to do something I don't want for the profit of others. And so this is what people trafficking is. For example, illegal workers that are transported from one country to the other illegally across the border and then are enslaved in plantations, for example. And there are slaves today in the Iberian Peninsula, for example, and in other countries of the European Union. There are people, of course, illegally working as slaves. And these people many times come from countries trafficked by criminal organizations. So people trafficking is a phenomena that exists for many years and it's slightly increasing, but it's not something that is ramping up like cocaine trafficking. And it's important that you know the difference between people trafficking and migrant smuggling. Okay. And then, of course, there is economic migration, which is someone that is legally moving from one country to the other to work, and there is a work contract. So this person is legally uh, is an economic migrant. It's changing its life, no problem. And then you have refugees, which is something completely different, which are persons that are pursued in their countries of origin, for example, for political reasons or religion reasons or sexual orientation. They are pursued in their countries and they have to leave their countries, otherwise, they will be arrested or killed. And so these are refugees, and there is a specific status for this kind of people under the UN laws. So all it's important that you understand these four things. One thing is a person trafficked, another thing is a migrant smuggled, another thing is an economic migrant, and yet another thing is a refugee. And sometimes you hear the news and everybody thinks that migrants are people coming into our country. So it's very important to understand these four. And in your case, that will be working in ports and in a maritime transport business, I hope, you will often find many of these different situations. So you need to understand what is what. Then you have another crime, which is firearms trafficking. This is very straightforward. Everybody understands what this is all about. This is about bringing arms from one country to the other. There can be small arms like pistols and gun and shotguns or machine guns, lightweight weaponry, or we can be talking like in the picture about not in this picture but in another one that will come next. We could be talking about armored cars, armored vehicles with cannons and stuff like that. So very big things. So normally in this the maritime transport is very appealing to these crimes, all of these crimes that I told you, most of them, but especially this one, because 80% of the goods transaction in Europe go or in the world uh, are transported by sea. And so it's very convenient to use the standard shipping activity and take advantage of it and use it for a parasite activity, which is can be to smuggle arms or to smuggle people or to traffic cocaine, because you have the containers or you have general cargo ships or you have ro-ro ships, and you put all this stuff inside with or without the consent of the shipping company and the ship captain and so on and crew. So there are many variations. So ships are very convenient, and shipping is very convenient for these parasite activities. And so firearms is also another uh, of these activities. Normally in Europe, uh, there is not so many weapons being trafficked through ships. Normally, what the biggest phenomena is in the land borders within the European Union. But if you go to other regions like Africa or Latin America and Caribbean, especially regions where there is war, you might see much more of this going on and big heavy weapons being transported by ships from one port to another. And normally the port security is not that good. And so this can happen more frequently around these areas. Another maritime crime that I'd like to talk to you about is nuclear material, the trafficking of nuclear material. So, as you can imagine, nuclear material is used to make bombs, but not necessarily only that. It can also be used for other cases like medicine products, etc. So the best way to control this is to monitor all the material that is transported uh, in ships and not. that has or is somehow related to nuclear components. So this is done by an international organization which has databases, but these databases are quite confidential and only available to the staff of that international organization, and in some cases to some government officials. So the data is not public, but we know that, for example, in 2023, there were 168 incidents around the world related with the trafficking of nuclear material. Of course, I'm not referring only, and it is important that you note this, to the trafficking of nuclear weapons. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is trafficking of nuclear material that could be related to the production of nuclear weapons or something else based on this kind of technology, not so harmful, but still it's a technology that is very well controlled. So this has been increasing slightly, and of course, it's another parasite activity and another maritime crime. The other crime that I'd like to talk to you about is piracy and armed robbery. So piracy, I already mentioned a bit what happened in Somalia. Piracy is also very much prevalent in the Gulf of Guinea. Probably it's where it is more active these days. There is also piracy in the Indian Ocean. And there is piracy also, of course, in the Latin America and Caribbean, with less let's say intensity, but still it is existing there. So this piracy should be distinguished from armed robbery. So armed robbery is about stealing, and armed robbery happens inside the territorial waters of a country. Outside those territorial waters, it is considered piracy according to the UN, or outside air or in areas that are not controlled by any country. So this means that any act. So basically, it's piracy and armed robbery in practice are the same thing. So it's someone going on board the vessel and hijacking the vessel, or kidnapping the persons, or stealing the goods that are inside that vessel. This is the action. Now, where the action takes place is what will determine if it is armed robbery or piracy. So it's a geographical distinction, because the criminal act in itself is the same thing, more or less the same thing. And so it's important that you know this distinction. And then you have the case of terrorism at sea, which is also very interesting. So terrorism at sea, first of all, let me distinguish terrorism at sea from terrorism in ports. So terrorism in ports, I have never heard of, but I think that's because criminals didn't think much about it, because there is no difference between attacking an airport or attacking a cruise terminal. Probably it's easier to put a bomb in a cruise terminal than in an airport. And the reason being that in an airport, it has been tried more times. So the security is there is much tighter. But I've been in passenger terminals around the world where it is very easy to go in and plant a bomb. And you can imagine a cruise vessel with 2,000 people going in at the same time. You can imagine the impact, because terrorism is about impact, the impact that an attack in such a facility will create. So terrorism in ports, or especially there is also the case more theoretically of, for example, attacking facilities that have for example, chemical materials that can poison the air and the water. There are also these examples which are valid, but there are no cases, or at least no public cases, about this kind of terrorism. Uh, when we are talking about ports and port facilities. But there is a risk, and you should be very uh, cons- not concerned, but keep an eye on these possibilities. And in many cases, probably you will find passenger terminals that are not properly secured. And so the risk when you are doing your assessments, your port security assessments, if you ever become a port facility security officer, you will be doing assessments. So take this into consideration, although there are no cases to note. And then something completely different is terrorism at sea. Terrorism at sea is also not very often occurring. There are no cases in the last let's say 2 decades or so, but uh, but but there is some examples, and one very concrete example was, if I'm not mistaken, in the Philippines, in Manila. There was a super ferry. It was the Super Ferry 14 in Manila Bay, and an Al Qaeda linked group, Abu Sayyaf. You probably heard of it. That bombed no, but planted a bomb on this super ferry, and it was a tragedy. And the other was a suicide attack, initially intended for an oil terminal, but that was conducted against a small boat from a U.S. Ship. So these attacks go a way long back. If you Google the Manila Bay incident, is probably the most well known, from I think 2007, if I'm not mistaken, or a bit earlier. And so I think this is the most well known, and maybe the first or last cases that we have heard about terrorism at sea. So again, here, what I'd like you to retain is terrorism at sea is one thing. There were a couple of cases and no more. And the reason being that terrorists and they have to be real experts to know how to create, to make a terrorist attack on a ship, which you can roughly compare to making a terrorist attack on an airplane. The difference being that if you put a bomb on an airplane, the airplane will come down. If you put a bomb on a ship, luckily ships today have many characteristics, architectural characteristics that prevent them from sinking. So I think perpetrating a terrorist attack on a ship would not be so easy, or at least so impactful, as doing it on an aircraft. And then there is the case where the aircraft has a lot of people on board, and unless you are doing it on a cruise ship, then the impact is not so big. But still, it is a possibility, but very low. And terrorism in ports is even lower, because the probability is very lower, because there were no cases recorded, at least to my knowledge, around the world. And but the impacts in ports can be quite big, much bigger than at sea. And at sea, it's much more difficult for terrorists to do something than in port. So these are the main ideas that I'd like you to keep. And last but not least, drug trafficking. So drug trafficking is a big problem. I already talked about this. And basically what happens here, especially if we talk about cocaine, which is the big problem that the EU is facing. So ports, for you to have an idea, ports nowadays contribute to 75% of EU external trade volumes, and 31% of EU internal trade volumes. So this tells about the importance of ports. And of course, drug trafficking organizations, criminal organizations, take advantage of shipping to introduce cocaine and other drugs in Europe through the European ports. This is a very hot topic these days. The European Commission is very much concerned, and the governments, both of the origin and destination countries, are very much concerned about this. Um, and since I'm talking about the cocaine trafficking, you can see in the chart in this slide, you can find it online, these kind of charts. If you look for cocaine trafficking routes, you can find this in many places, many official publications from Europol, Frontex, many organizations, EUDA, European Drugs Agency. There are many sources that have this kind of data. And I'm just talking about the European ones. Then you have UNODC, you have the US Coast Guard, and other sources that you might want to consult. But basically, I mean, if I would describe drug trafficking routes in a word, it's everywhere because they basically they go wherever they see a way. So you can see in the picture behind the slide, you can see there are arrows basically going from everywhere to everywhere. And the source is normally Latin America and the Caribbean, but especially South America, heading into Europe, sometimes through Africa, sometimes directly to Europe, sometimes around. So, I mean, they try everything they can. Um, and so it's growing exponentially, as I told you, cocaine trafficking in Europe. It's done through the contamination of containers and through the contamination of vessels. And the complete supply chain is affected. So let me tell you, I've been in countries where, and this is standard procedure for drug traffickers. So they contaminate the product. So if you have a pineapple, they can cut the pineapple, take the pineapple from inside, leaving it empty, and then they put the cocaine inside and they put the top of the pineapple again, and there you go. Then they put the pineapple in a box, and you think that you are importing a nice box of pineapples, and when you open them, they have like 1 kilo of cocaine inside. And there are even anecdotal cases where actually pineapples ended up in the supermarket and people buying these pineapples without knowing that they had cocaine inside because the traffickers made a mistake and they lost track of the cargo, and some pineapples ended up in supermarkets. So they also make mistakes, but just for you to have an idea, and this is an example of what they call product contamination. Then they contaminate in every possible way the containers. They contaminate inside the container the boxes where the pineapples are. So they take the pineapples out and they put some kilos of cocaine in their place, or they rip completely the structure of the container in the top, in the bottom, in the walls, and they stuff cocaine in the walls of the container and they close it again. Or if they are refrigerated containers, they unscrew the doors that allow access for maintenance of the refrigerators of the container from the outside, and they can easily put 20, 50 kilos of cocaine in one of those places. So it's huge, and they completely rip apart the container. They put drugs inside, inside the container, inside the structure, in the refrigeration system, inside the boxes, in the products. So they put cocaine everywhere. In the vessels, it's the same thing. So they can put inside the vessel, they can put outside the vessel, attached to the vessel with magnets, taking advantage of the architecture of the vessel. There are, as you know, some places that are holes, or some places that are used, for example, to balance the ship. They use that to tie cocaine cargoes to the vessel. And so as a port security officer, you need to pay attention to this. And for example, in some ports, we go to some ports, and I go to some ports to do security assessments. And I see that, for example, cameras don't see very well to the area of the water line. So cameras are very much concerned about the inside of the terminal and not so much the outside, the wet area. And what happens is that they use divers to come into the ship or rubber boats and to put cocaine cargoes attached to the ship that then are extracted when they arrive in Europe. So this is vessels contamination. They also have the ninjas, which are guys, for example, if the vessel goes through a canal and they come in rubber boats and they approach the boat and they climb like with 70 kilos of cocaine. A man with 70 kilos weight brings on his back 70 kilos of cocaine, so it's like another man, and it climbs 5 6 meters of the board of the vessel, goes inside, opens the container, puts the drug inside, and goes out in like 15 minutes. So this is how they do it. So they contaminate the vessel while the vessel is in the port. They contaminate the vessel while the vessel is in transit in territorial waters or inside canals. And then they contaminate the trucks, for example. They contaminate the inside the ports. They go inside the port, they open the containers, put drug inside, and they close the containers and they leave. They contaminate the plantations. So this is a widespread problem that affects the complete supply chain. And then here in Europe, they do the way around. So they go into the ports, they take the drug out, and they bring it into the city in empty containers or in trucks or in cars or in the most creative ways that you can think about. And this is important for you because when we put a port in the context of drug trafficking, contrarily to other criminal activities, these kind of criminals, they don't want the port to stop. They don't want the port to stop because if the port stops, the drugs will not go out and their business, because it is a parasite business, if the shipping business is not good, their business is also not good. So they don't want to affect the business. They want to know how to take advantage of the business because they are a parasite activity. So they resort to corruption and extortion. Let me be very clear here. People in ports are exposed every day to threats of corruption and extortion because these criminal organizations, they want to know who works there, what are they doing there, to which information they have access because they need that information to organize their criminal activities. They want to know where they live. They will offer them money. They will threaten their families. That will happen. And it's very important that all the personal information about these people is protected. You have to protect the information about these people. I see in many ports that I go, for example, people go to LinkedIn and I say, I'm the port security officer of this port, or I'm the person in charge of human resources of this port. It's nice, but you are exposed. From this moment on, I know you are, I have your picture, I know in which port you work, and it will not be very difficult. And maybe the most difficult way to do it is to go outside the port and wait until you leave and then follow you until you get home. There you go. And now I know who you are. And if I spend a few more days on this, I will know where your kids work, go to school, where your wife or husband work, if you have a dog or a cat, whatever. So I will know everything about you. And then I will use other criminal networks to know how much you have in your bank, what is your bank, which is your bank. If you have any problems, for example, of drug consumption, alcohol abuse, if you have lovers, I will use all this information to uh, intimidate and to control people and to turn them in my favor to be able to do my activity. That's how they operate. And everybody working in the shipping business need to be very, very careful about this and be very reserved about what you voluntarily disclose about who you are and what you do. more and more. So this is very important, and I want to make this message very clearly across the table to you guys. Data breach is very important. Nobody pays attention, for example, to the list of workers in the port because probably it's an Excel file, or in a transport company, or for example, you give too much information to the truck driver, like to which country that cargo is going, when that cargo is leaving, what is the origin port, what is the destination port, what is the nature of the cargo. It's not uncommon to stop a driver, ask him for the paperwork, and you will see all the information that you need to plan a drug trafficking operation. It's there in the paperwork of the truck driver. So you need to minimize this information to protect the person and to protect the cargo and to protect the business. So data breaches are very common. And then once you know who works where, and once you corrupt them, and once you extort them, threaten them, then you will be able to access much more information, like when the police will be there, when the police will not be there, who is there working on the security companies. I've been assessing ports where the full company, security company, private security company of the port was corrupted. So it was the private security of the port that was facilitating drug trafficking through the port. So this is a big issue, especially in South American countries, but also in European countries, because there you need, if in one place you need to put the drug in the other place you need to bring the drug out. So the problem, the objective is different, but the way of operating of the criminals is very similar. Falsification of data, disruption of systems. Here, if we talk about a port, we are talking about access control systems and surveillance systems, because I want to hide my tracks. I want to access certain places without being controlled or surveyed by cameras. But if we talk about law enforcement systems, then we are talking about command and control or communication systems. Why? To disrupt their capability to arrest me or to arrest them if I am a criminal. So the types of systems that they focus in one case and the other depends on what they are trying to achieve. But typically for ports, it, you should be paying a lot of attention to access control systems and video surveillance systems. And as I told you, they don't aim to disrupt port operations. So of course there is you all know this, I suppose. It's in Gibraltar. It's a very dangerous region. It's referred to as the drug trafficking capital of Europe. And basically the social economic impacts are a lack of trust. I've been interviewing people, for example, from the Coast Guard, where two people that work together in the Coast Guard, they don't talk to each other about the problems, these kind of problems, because they don't know if they are talking to a person that is corrupted or being pressured somehow by a criminal. And everything that I will tell that person will tell to the criminals. And also, that person could tell that I am someone that is trying to go against drug trafficking or something like that. And so I could be in trouble. So because I could be in trouble, I don't speak about this freely. And now I don't trust my coworkers, my colleagues. And so now you see, through this process of corruption, extortion, now you don't have any more trust inside the organizations that are supposed to protect and manage the port. And once you lose this, then all the organization falls apart, because nobody trusts anybody, because they fear for their lives and for the lives of their families. And I'm not exaggerating here. I've been in countries where this is the case. So violence and fear, narco cities is already a problem in Europe. Marseille, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Algeciras are cities where drug trafficking is widespread and creating difficulties to the society, not only to the ports and to the workers and to the transport companies and to law enforcement. Now the problem is widespreading to the community. And of course, the reputation. I've seen a full container terminal that was completely full with containers, thousands of containers. From one week to the other, it became completely empty. Completely empty. Why? Because the two main shipping companies were suffering so much reputational damage because their containers were being contaminated, that they decided to do operations in a completely different terminal that was more secure, not exposed to these kind of threats, to recover and not to be affected by reputational problems. So can you imagine a terminal, a full terminal with thousands of containers that is moving hundreds of containers per day from one week to the other, becomes completely empty. So this means out of business. Why? Because you couldn't keep the security of the terminal. So this is a very, very serious matter for society, for people, for lives, for economy, for business. It's a very, very serious issue. Now, we all know about the ISPS code. We know about the levels, the security, the MARSEC levels. We know about all of this. We know about the EU directive that strengthens the ISPS code in the European domain. For example, ports are not considered in the ISPS code. I mean, ports as a whole. What is considered in the ISPS code is port facilities and ships. But then you have the full concept of port, which is an aggregation of port facilities or a set of port facilities. And so the European directive is more concrete, establishing a clear relationship between the port administration and the port facilities. And then we have the NIS2 directive, which probably don't know what it is, but it is a directive about critical infrastructures. It is a directive about the cybersecurity, and this has implications in the protection of access control systems, logistics systems, surveillance systems, protection of data, sensitive personal data, which is mandatory in the EU. And there are very, very high fines if you have some problem with the security with the cybersecurity of critical systems. And ports are critical infrastructures according to this directive. And if I'm not mistaken, the fines can go from 4% of the annual revenue of a port. Can you imagine? 4% of the annual revenue of a port can be the maximum fine, or if I'm not mistaken, 20 million euro in one fine. So can you imagine the financial impact if you don't comply with everything that you have to comply in a port terminal regarding this directive? And the main idea behind this is not to take away the money from the port facilities, for the governments to take away the money from port facilities. The main idea behind this is to force the port terminals to invest in cybersecurity, because they are driven to business and by financial profit. If there is not a substantial risk for not compliance, they will very rarely invest. And you will see that in many cases, cybersecurity is seen as a cost and not as an investment. And for this reason, without knowing, then the ports, the terminals, the business, the people, law enforcement, their families, and everyone related is threatened, as I told you before. So this is a directive that is very important to be followed. Also, the Critical Entities Resilience Directive is a similar one, but applied to the physical aspects. And this also includes ports and port terminals. There is also the CRA directive, which is not here, which is about the protection of the supply chain in terms of cybersecurity. For example, in a port, you have a computer system that is developed by a third-party company. So you need to make sure that that company is doing secure software development, for example. And then if you are hosting your system and your data in a data center that is a private data center outside the premises of the port and belonging to a different company, then you also have to make sure that data center is cyber secure. And this is what the CRA directive is about cybersecurity across, along the supply chain when it comes to IT systems. Then you all, I suppose, know about the GDPR regulation, the protection of personal data, very important, as I told you, from the moment that criminals try to know who people that work in a port are and what they do and where they live and how to contact them. ISO 27001 is a very important certification for information security that is very often, and especially not, well, in Europe, there are many cases, but there are more implementations of this certification. But in many other cases around the world and also in Europe, this certification is not normally done by port terminals and related companies, and it should be done because it obliges the organizations to follow certain patterns and a risk-driven approach to, and they learn how to mitigate these risks and to put controls in place to mitigate many of the risks that I've been talking about. And the certification is a next level where someone that is external and independent will come and say that the organization where you work is certified and is doing its best to mitigate these risks that are coming from the cyberspace. So in terms of protection of critical infrastructures, what I'd like to tell you is basically that these days there are many maritime critical infrastructures. Ports are some of these, but also submarine cables, telecommunications cables. There are many, many risks for these critical infrastructures, and the impacts are very important. You can cut a submarine cable, for example, in the Red Sea, and affect the internet in Africa, or the other way around. You can cut a submarine cable in Africa and affect internet, for example, in Europe, or the connections to Europe. So there are many, many, many implications with critical infrastructures. So it's very important to develop cyber resilience. So it's not only to protect from a cyber incident, but it's also being able to recover from a cyber incident once it happens. This idea of resilience is very important, and oftentimes people think about protecting the assets, but they don't think about how to recover the situation once the assets have been hit by an attack. This is very important. The role of information sharing is very, very important. I've been in countries, for example, where there is no forum for organizations to work with each other in terms of the security of the port. So police, the port, customs, all these agents, they, of course, they know each other, but there is no committee or no forum where they need to work with each other and work together to plan and to carry out the security that a port and the transporting agencies around need to be carried out. And so if they don't have this organization working together and in place, when the big problems come, they are not ready. And it's still, if they have it, it will be difficult. But if they don't have it, it will be much more difficult. For example, in Europe, we have directives and national laws that oblige these committees. But in other areas of the world, these national laws or regional laws, they don't exist. And the ISPS code does not mandate these kind of things. And so only when they have the problem, they realize that they have to create these solutions, but then they don't trust anyone. And then you can imagine what it is to try to create an organization for exchanging information where you are afraid of talking to the other persons in that organization because you fear for your life or the life of your friends and family. So once the problem is there, is much more difficult to go around it. So these organizations should be in place and working on a daily basis before the big problems come. And last but not least, maritime domain awareness, very much important. There are many, many applications, VTS systems in the ports, etc., to know what is going on at sea. And the information about what is going on at sea is very, very valuable to everyone that is protecting the port from the high seas to the coasts, and in through the rivers. All this information is very much important. Of course, not so important for the port security officer, but for example, for law enforcement agencies to protect and to deny criminal activities that ultimately or eventually will affect the port. So all this information is important. So for example, if a port has a system and doesn't provide information about that system to a law enforcement, is hampering the the action of those law enforcement agencies, and the consequence of that is that the port will also be less protected. So these authorities need to cooperate. They need to have a platform for cooperation. They need to work together. They need to exchange information. Now, the cybersecurity challenges, I've spoke about them more or less, but information available, please preserve the information. Don't give away voluntarily information that can put you at risk. Be very careful about personal data inside the organizations, because this will be the first target of criminal organizations interested in drug trafficking. And so you need to protect people, and the first way to protect people is to protect their identities and what they do. Because if I don't know who the target is, I cannot shoot the target. So you need to deny this, and especially don't make it public. Don't make their life easier by putting on Facebook what you do, or on LinkedIn what you do. So you need to understand the risk. You are not in danger every day, but you need to understand these risks. And some things are cool, some things are cool and dangerous. So this is the kind of thing that when you are in this line of business, you have to be careful, because what you are doing on LinkedIn can be cool, but at the same time can endanger you. So normally there is a very little maturity about these topics of cybersecurity, information security. Everybody thinks that the hacker is someone with a hoodie working in a garage and trying to go through a firewall. But we are not talking about this anymore. We can be talking about a cleaning person that is working in the port, that puts a USB key inside the administrative computer that will steal the personnel database and send it to someone through email or whatever, or through the network. And then all the information about the staff in that company is from one moment to the other in the hands of a criminal organization. And it was a cleaning person that probably earns, I don't know, 500 euros per month, or 600 euros, or not even less, depending on the country. And to whom, if I give that person 1,000 euros, it will be very easy to corrupt that person. Or, of course, I can threaten that person. Even it will be even easier. So cybersecurity is much more than the guy with a hoodie in the garage trying to break the firewall. There is a lot more into that. And so work together with your cybersecurity staff, separate the roles. Cybersecurity is not IT. Cybersecurity are the guys that are going to protect the information. So if the guy responsible for cybersecurity is the same guy that is implementing and developing the information systems, there is an obvious conflict of interest. So you cannot ask the guy that is building the prison to make sure that the prison is working fine. You need to send someone there to see if the prison is well built. Otherwise, the guy will normally tell you that, yes, the prison is very good, thank you. So you need to separate these roles. And normally, everywhere that I go, these roles are together. And even worse, they are not speaking to the top management. They are under some financial department, something very obscure. So in some cases, they never speak to the main manager. And the main manager needs to have direct contact to the cybersecurity guys and to the information system guys, and these two need to be two completely separate teams, um, close to the management. There must be clear strategies for these two teams to have a good control of what is going on there. Otherwise, it's a risk and a problem waiting to be triggered. Um, Resources normally are already said this cybersecurity is seen as a cost, not as an investment. And of course, when you have a problem, you will regret not having invested enough in cybersecurity. And the problems go well beyond the immediate impact in the business. Reputational impacts can last many, many years. If you are considered a terminal that is not secure, for example, in the example that I gave you before, shipping companies can leave and might never return. And so this means you are out of business for the next years. So this will take trust. I learned this the other day and I pass it over to you. Trust is earned by the drops and is lost by the buckets. So this means that to earn trust is drop by drop very slowly, but to lose trust, you throw away buckets of water. So it's very disproportional. So it's very easy to lose trust and very difficult to get it. Cybersecurity is very much related to this. So what can we do? First of all, if the humans are the target, then we need to minimize the humans in the process. So nowadays in modern ports, we don't see so many people in the port going around. So not only because of safety features, but also because of security features. Because if they are not there, they cannot be corrupted, they cannot be extortion. So minimize human intervention as much as possible. But still, you have to put people somewhere, right? So, but minimize it and then decrease the information available. If they cannot see the target, they cannot hit the target. So don't make their life easier. Then stronger access controls. Everybody likes biometry, but remember that biometric systems, they are statistical systems. Instead, password or PIN codes are systems that either are right or wrong. Either you put they are deterministic. Either you put the right password, the right PIN code, or you don't put it. If you don't, you don't enter. If you put it right, you enter. A biometric code looks like science fiction, but normally the sensors, they try to they give you access based on a percentage of your biometric factor. So they can allow you to enter if your fingerprint corresponds 80% to what is on the database. And so this is a probabilistic system, and it can be tricked much easier than another system that is deterministic. So you should use dual factor and combine the two, but never have one access control system only with biometrics because you think it's more sophisticated, but in fact it's not. And I challenge you to go back, and when you go to your working places, or when you start working in some place, pay attention to the access control systems. And then you will remember me when you will see very fancy biometric systems spread throughout the port or the terminal or whatever, only based on biometry. And then think about what I told you. So training, education, certification, very important. Internal threat mitigation programs. It's important to pay attention to what people are doing inside, because the enemy, in many cases, especially in these cases of drug trafficking, the enemy is inside the terminal. The enemy is inside the security company. The enemy is inside the police force. And it can be the general. I've been in a country where 15 days before, the general in charge of the narco traffic operations in the country was arrested for corruption because he was working for the traffickers. Can you imagine? The leader of the most important organization to fight drug trafficking in the country was arrested because he was working with them. So there are no prototypes. Can be a man, can be a woman, can be old, can be young, can be a manager, can be a cleaning lady, can be anyone that serves their interest. The only thing that matters is If it is useful, they will approach that person. So collaboration, cooperation, and information sharing, again, this cannot be dealt with alone on your own. You cannot do this alone. You have to cooperate. You have to collaborate with other authorities inside the organization. And you need to do this on a systematic way, not only after the problem is there, because after the problem is there is not much you can do. So I will end here my presentation. I hope that I not scared you. That is not the point, but I hope that I have inspired you to learn more about this and to pay attention to these aspects. And when you are on your working life, keep an eye open to these things. When you do risk assessments, think about these things. Don't see cybersecurity as a risk or as a cost. See it as an investment and train, and work together and collaborate and make connections and develop the network, because when the problem comes, everything that you have will not be good enough. So I will stop here. If Dr. Jesus Marin, my dear friend, is still awake and listening to me.
Yes, for sure I'm here. And
Uh,
I was as well answering the question by the chat as well, because we have a lot of questions for you.
okay,
It means that this conference has been very interesting for the students.
okay, thank
Asking
you.
some a lot of interesting questions. So I will close the. If you want, please. I will do for you. I think.
Because I cannot
Yes.
see I cannot see the
Yes.
questions.
Now, no. I will let you know. Uh,
Okay, okay.
okay.
Good. I'm happy then. I'm very happy.
Yes. La primera pregunta nos dice Oscar Blanco Marín. Dice, si la economía azul busca proteger los océanos, ¿sería posible en el futuro crear un modelo donde el mar deje de ser visto como un recurso a explotar?
Yo pienso que, bien, esa es una buenísima pregunta. Yo pienso que en el concepto de economía azul está implícito, pero no, tal vez se deba decir más, pero está implícito la idea de sostenibilidad. Eso está implícito. O sea, el mar se ve como un recurso y se verá siempre como un recurso y como una ruta, como una forma de irse de un continente al otro. Siempre será así, siempre ha sido así. Yo pienso que la idea llave es cómo utilizar ese recurso y ese común, esa cosa común de la humanidad. Como sabéis, hay los comunes globales, no sé cómo decirlo en español, the global commons, que
Yes.
son el océano, el espacio, eh, la Antártica, la estratosfera. O sea,
Sí,
hay cosas que son comunes de la
de la
humanidad
humanidad, sí.
y el océano es una de esas cosas. Entonces, claro que tiene recursos, como todo eso de que estoy hablando, pero y no hay cómo evitarlo, utilizar esos recursos y utilizarlos como pasaje, pero la llave es sostenibilidad y todo lo que hacemos tendrá que ser sostenible. Y por eso termino aquí diciendo que, por ejemplo, el tema de mineración submarina ahora está siendo prohibido por las Naciones Unidas y hay una, no sé cómo decirlo, hay una asociación de países que se manifestó en las Naciones Unidas y están firmando, se llama algo rogatorio, cartas rogatorias o algo así, que impiden la mineración submarina hasta que se entienda bien del punto de vista científico cuál podrán ser los impactos y cómo prevenirlos. Y antes que se consiga llegar a eso, la mineración submarina no será permitida, por lo menos por esos países. Entonces, la llave es sostenibilidad.
También nos pregunta Uriol Morcillo, dice que está encantado con la conferencia, gracias por eso, Uriol. Y dice las últimas subidas del precio del oro. Dice que si cree que puede haber generado un aumento del crimen organizado en ese sector a nivel también de transporte marítimo o a nivel de piratería, imagino.
Sí, cuando hay piratería, basta pensar, por ejemplo, lo que pasa con los UTIs, que es un fenómeno reciente en el Mar Rojo. Lo que pasa con los UTIs no es un caso de piratería, es una acción armada de un grupo rebelde, pero que está asociado al gobierno de un país, ¿no? De Yemen, y que han decidido atacar los buques que les interesa, que pasan por el Mar Rojo, ¿no? Y con eso, las compañías de navegación han eh, desviado las rutas de sus buques y ahora hay un montón de buques que no pasan ya por Mar Rojo porque había un riesgo muy grande, pasan por África del Sur y vienen por el Atlántico. Entonces, eso, como puede imaginar, tiene un impacto muy grande en el coste del transporte marítimo y eso se va a refletir en el coste de las cosas son, que de 80% de las cosas que vienen por mar, ¿no? Entonces, eso va a tener un impacto no solo en el costo, en el coste en el negocio de transporte marítimo, pero también en todas las sociedades que van a utilizar esos productos que vienen por vía marítima. Entonces, todos esos crímenes, el terrorismo, ah, la piratería, el tráfico de drogas, por ejemplo, cuando una compañía de navegación cambia de un terminal al otro, va a existir un impacto en el negocio marítimo y ese impacto va a ser diluido a través de toda la cadena de suministro.
Totalmente de acuerdo. Y aquí hay alguna pregunta que también aprovecharé de responder junto con Sergio, ya que hemos investigado en la misma área. Hay una que trata, nos la hace Carolina, si se han hecho acciones suficientemente efectivas para parar la piratería en África. Luego también hay otra pregunta, si se está haciendo lo suficiente para mejorar la seguridad con respecto a Somalia en específico. Y luego hay una tercera que tiene que ver, que las tres se encajan, que tiene que ver con los polizontes, personas ocultas y trata de blanca, ¿no? O sea, que son dos ámbitos bastante diferenciados, pero que ocurren en lo mismo, ¿no? Es que al final es
Esa
tráfico de
última
personas.
no la entendí bien, Jesús.
Sí, la última es si se está haciendo o existen medidas a nivel de desarrollo, ¿verdad? Donde se pueda evitar el tráfico de personas, ¿vale? En los dos áreas, ¿eh? Tanto en la parte que
Piratería.
es piratería, como en la parte de migración ilegal, como en la parte también del tráfico de personas como tal, a nivel de trata de blanca, ¿no?
Sí, sí, claro que sí. Son problemas muy bien identificados, no son problemas nuevos. Y son problemas donde las autoridades trabajan muchísimo, las autoridades de los países acá en Europa, pero también en África, en Asia, en América del Sur, en los aeropuertos, en los puertos. Es un trabajo continuo en las Naciones Unidas, por ejemplo, la Comisión Europea, sus agencias, Frontex, um, o sea, Europol, Interpol, por ejemplo, aquí en Lisboa tenemos MAOC-N, que es una organización dedicada al tráfico de droga, una organización internacional. O sea, hay todo un montón de trabajo que es hecho diariamente en muchos países y organizaciones europeas e internacionales, pero ellos tienen un montón, ellos los criminales tienen un montón de recursos. Un- Son casi recursos infinitos. Un kilo de droga que puede costar 1.000 euros en América del Sur puede ser vendido en Europa por 10.000. Entonces, es increíble. O el tráfico de personas es también muy lucrativo. Y son negocios ilegales y muy lucrativos y es muy difícil que los países tengan el mismo nivel de recursos. O sea, ellos están siempre un paso adelante. La mejor forma de mitigar eso es a través de la colaboración y de la cooperación, compartir información. Eso es lo más difícil. porque nunca tendremos los medios al mismo nivel que ellos los van a tener, porque tienen muchos más recursos y sobre todo ellos juegan con la vida, ¿no? Ellos no se importan y muchas
Exacto.
veces juegan con la vida de los otros. O sea, el pirata y el traficante que está en el buque es una persona que está siendo extorsionada o corrompida. No es el grande traficante. Es alguien que va allí porque ha llegado a esa situación. Entonces, esa vida para ellos no importa. O sea, no les importa la vida. O sea, la vida es también un recurso. Y eso las autoridades no tienen. O sea, ellos están siempre un paso adelante. Y hay que trabajar en conjunto. Y eso es lo más difícil. Hice mi tesis de doctorado sobre compartir información de seguridad marítima
Ujú.
interagencias.
De acuerdo.
Esa ha sido mi tesis de doctorado. Les puedo decir, hoy continúa el problema. Es un problema humano. Por mucho que se haga, colaborar, cooperar y compartir no es como somos educados. Nosotros somos educados a competir. Y eso para mí es un problema fundamental en la sociedad moderna. Nos enseñan en pequeñitos, tienes que ser el mejor, tienes que tener las mejores notas en la escuela, tienes que ser el mejor en tu desporto. Vamos a competir, competir te va a hacer más fuerte, eso es verdad, pero te va a hacer más fuerte solo, porque los grandes problemas no se resuelven solos. Hay un proverbio africano que dice, si quieres ir rápido, bate suelo, si quieres ir lejos, bate en compañía de otros. Y los grandes problemas que tenemos en la sociedad de hoy se resuelvan en compañía y no solo. Y se resuelven a través de cooperación, colaboración, compartición de información. Y no somos educados para eso. Somos educados para cada vez más una sociedad competitiva, materialista, individualista. Y eso no nos ayuda. Pero ese es tema para
Sí,
una
sí,
otra.
y a eso también ahí podríamos sumar la no continuidad de las políticas con los cambios de gobierno que hay y la corrupción que hay en estos sitios. Que bueno, ya sumando esto llegamos a un conflicto geopolítico, ¿no? Voy
Sí,
con las
sí.
preguntas que se nos acaba el tiempo. Nos preguntaba Claudia sobre, en caso, por ejemplo, de la exportación de frutas, que si, luego completaré yo la respuesta también por parte de Barcelona, pero me gustaría que Sergio lo complemente si hay escáneres y tecnología de inspección intrusiva que sirvan para detectar las drogas.
Perdón.
En el caso de la exportación de frutas, si hay escáneres o tecnología de inspección intrusiva, o sea, tecnología más moderna que permita detectar la droga en las frutas.
Sí, bien, en las frutas, por ejemplo, el ejemplo que les dije de cortar una piña, meterle un paquete de droga dentro y taparlo, eso sí, hay formas de descubrir eso con los escáneres, pero ahora se hace mucho es diluir la droga en otros productos y, por ejemplo, después congelarlos. Y entonces ahí se queda mucho más difícil porque en verdad es como ver una botella de agua y aquí te puedo diluir 200 gramos de cocaína y no lo vas a ver. O sea, los escáneres son buenos para detectar y aún tienen fragilidades siempre, pero en general son buenos para detectar cosas basadas en su forma física. Pero si diluimos la droga, sí hace perder la forma.
Sí, y hay otra que otra pregunta también. Bueno, también decir que en Barcelona tenemos, un caso, manejando un poco también puertos europeos de Barcelona, los escáneres, claro, son aleatorios. No podemos escanear, lo comentaba en el chat, no podemos escanear todos los contenedores. Imaginar un barco de 18.000, 20.000 teus. Entonces siempre va a haber ahí un coladero, ¿no? Por esa parte.
Eso es. En media, en el mundo, la media mundial son 4% de contenedores que son escaneados. O sea, si yo tengo un negocio de narcotráfico y se te envío 4 contenedores, 100 contenedores para Europa, si 4 van a ser escaneados y la probabilidad de los 4, estoy siendo optimista, si los 4 van a ser detectados, hay 96 que se van a pasar
que se van a
porque
pasar.
no han sido escaneados.
Exacto.
O sea, en un negocio normal, dígame cuál es el margen de lucro. Estamos hablando normal, 30, 50, depende. 4% para mí no es nada.
No es nada. Em, también ya hemos
O
respondido
sea,
a
aquí
preguntas.
solo para completar,
Sí, sí,
¿cómo se podrá? Y eso es una pregunta. El contenedor ha sido inventado hace muchos años y es muy conveniente, pero ahora hay un problema de parasitación del contenedor. Y los contenedores, la forma de transporte de mercancías, que está altamente dependiente del contenedor, también está dependiente de sus vulnerabilidades. Y la parasitación ocurre porque el transportista del parasita eh, tiene vulnerabilidades. Entonces, para terminar o mitigar esa parasitación, habría que cambiar el modelo, o sea, tiene que haber una disrupción en el paradigma de transporte marítimo para
ujú,
que el parásita ya no se adapte al portador. ¿Entienden
exacto,
lo que estoy diciendo? O
exacto.
sea, eso tiene que implicar una revolución en el transporte marítimo, segundo yo pienso. Es como una pulga y un perro, ¿no?
Sí,
Si es una tortuga, ya no va a coger pulgas, ¿no? Entonces
exacto.
hay que pensar el transporte marítimo de forma diferente, porque continuar con 4% de escáner de contenedores no va
No va
a
a
parar
solucionar.
nada.
Sí, hay una pregunta también de, bueno, hay varias preguntas. Con respecto a Somalia específicamente, Sergio y Alex nos preguntan que, por ejemplo, cuáles los pasos a seguir y qué hace la Unión Europea y la ONU para mejorar la seguridad y el desarrollo en Somalia, que es origen
Sí.
de la piratería.
Sí, la Unión, bien. En primer lugar, el problema de Somalia ya no es tan grande como era hace unos años. Ahora se van a leer un poquito sobre Somalia. Continúa a ser un país con mucha guerra, continúa a ser un país con Al-Qaeda, continúa a ser un país con muchos problemas de seguridad, económicos, sociales. Es un país con muchas dificultades humanas a todos los niveles que puedan imaginar. Y ahí lo que les puedo decir es que tanto las Naciones Unidas como la Unión Europea tienen proyectos y programas que pueden ver en FPI, por ejemplo, que es la entidad de Unión Europea que hace cooperación con países terceros. Por ejemplo, el Banco Mundial, el Banco Africano de Desarrollo. O sea, hay todo un montón de instituciones que hacen proyectos para desarrollar las capacidades de un país, pero desarrollar un país pueden ver por vuestros países. Si estamos hablando de España, que es un país bastante desarrollado, aún así, para evoluir España es una cosa que tema toca, coge mucho tiempo, ¿no? Entonces, imagine un país que no tiene energía estable, que no tiene agua potable, que
Sí,
no tiene las cosas más básicas. Estamos tal vez 50, 100 años por la frente. Tenemos 50, 100 años por la frente. Y después hay un tema muy importante que es cuando se desarrollan, no es solo poner dinero, no es solo hacer cosas, no es solo dar formación, porque cuando se da formación, las personas se quedan de esa formación y migran para países donde les van a pagar más, porque ahora ya tienen una formación interesante, tienen un valor añadido y como en su sociedad no le pueden pagar mucho, van a emigrar para otras regiones. Ah, otra cosa es, por ejemplo, acontece mucho con países en África, se les voy a dar un buque, por ejemplo, pero después no saben manejar ese buque o no tienen dinero para combustible. Hay muchas historias de esas. ¿Por qué? Porque se les da el medio, pero no la capacidad de utilizar de forma sostenible el medio. Y eso, darles un buque va a coger un año o dos. Darles la capacidad de organización, de recursos financieros, recursos humanos, para que puedan manejar ese buque de forma sostenible, va a coger 10, 20 años. Entonces es eso que es necesario pensar cuando se ayuda a los países, es que va a coger mucho tiempo para tener resultados y aún más tiempo para tener resultados sostenibles. Jesús. Hola Jesús, te perdí, disculpa.
Sí, había quedado sin conexión un segundo. Ya estamos de vuelta. Nos quedan, es que nos quedan justo, nos salió una alarma de que nos quedan 2 minutos. Entonces, hay una pregunta de Noelia muy interesante, te las digo, las respondemos rápido. Una es de si debe haber una estrategia global para estimular la economía azul. Y yo ya adelanto que para eso estamos creando también una cátedra universitaria en el TecnoCampus sobre economía azul y que trabajaremos, de hecho mi trabajo ahora va a ser, aparte del máster y las clases va a ser ese, pero también quiero saber a nivel global cómo lo ves. Y luego hay un par de preguntas. Una habla de estos has estado tú en el terreno, cómo hacer para controlar las organizaciones criminales y para que no extorsionen a trabajadores en los puertos. Esto es muy complicado. Y la última, si el blockchain puede mejorar los sistemas de seguridad. Son las tres preguntas que nos quedan.
Sí, la primera no la entendí bien, pero ya te la pregunto de nuevo. Sobre el blockchain, sí, claro que sí. El blockchain es muy poderoso, y pienso que un problema que tenemos hoy día es el problema de la trazabilidad del cargo y de los contenedores y toda esa información en la cadena de suministro. Y pienso que el blockchain podrá tener un papel importante aquí en asegurar la integridad de la carga y de toda la información asociada a la cadena de suministro. Sí, claro que sí. Sobre las personas es un tema, por un lado, de seguridad, pero por otro lado, de desarrollo y social. Y no es fácil. La parte más fácil tal vez sea la seguridad, o sea, tienen que protegerse en primer lugar a sí propias, ¿no? No divulgar información. La segunda parte es que los puertos y las autoridades protejan también a esos trabajadores. A todos lugares donde voy, es la primera cosa que les digo, miren, tienen que proteger los trabajadores porque esas personas van a ser los salvos de esas organizaciones criminales.
Sí.
Y una vez corrompidas o fragilizadas esas personas, van a perderse vuestra organización y ya no se pueden fiar en lo que tienen. Entonces, es un trabajo difícil. Y después del punto de vista social, porque hay todo un tejido social alrededor de los puertos que empieza a vivir, que ya vive en dificultades muchas veces sociales y económicas, y que después va a haber una oportunidad en el negocio del narcotráfico. Entonces, el tema de educación, de desarrollo social y económico de poblaciones más desfavorecidas y sobre todo alrededor de los puertos es muy, muy importante para que no haya terreno fértil para que se desarrolle la criminalidad, porque la criminalidad organizada asociada al narcotráfico no importamos los traficantes de Colombia, por ejemplo, o de México, ¿no? No hay colombianos, 500 o 5.000 colombianos que vienen a Europa para organizar el narcotráfico. No, 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 eso no sucede. Lo que pasa es que vienen acá y van a trabajar con organizaciones criminales locales que ya existen con delincuentes, con otros narcotraficantes locales, otro tipo de criminales, y los van a reclutar. Y es como si hacen es como un McDonald's, ¿no? Es como,
Una
como
franquicia.
exacto. O sea, les dan una parte del negocio y ellos tienen que organizarse. Claro que les van a enseñar cómo hacerlo, pero después todo un modelo de negocio que ya está inventado y comprobado. Entonces, si no lo que quiero decir es que si no hay terreno fértil, si no hay organizaciones criminales en el país, si no hay organizaciones interesantes para que ellos puedan reclutar, será mucho más difícil tener su ejército, voy a llamarle así, acá, porque no hay. O sea, hay que desarrollar las sociedades y hoy día lo que se ve con una economía cada vez más que está creando muchas asimetrías. El índice de Gini, si queréis consultarlo, nos dice la diferencia entre los ricos y pobres en los países. Índice de Gini.
Gini.
Y cada vez más los países están con un índice de Gini mayor, o sea, la diferencia entre los ricos y los pobres es cada vez mayor. Y claro que no quiero decir que los ricos no deben tener el mérito y la recompensa de los riesgos y de su esfuerzo, pero lo que estoy diciendo es que cuando hay una, y no lo digo yo, pero lo que lo ha dicho Gini, es que cuando la asimetría es muy grande, las cosas no van a funcionar. Y entonces si hay terreno para crecer criminalidad, esa criminalidad va a ser explotada.
Ser explotada.
Entonces, ese es un tema, es la parte difícil, ¿no? Entonces, es por eso que no se deben segregar personas de otros, por ejemplo, poner todos los migrantes en una ciudad o en un barrio o poner los criminales en otro barrio, porque eso es crear oportunidades.
Sí,
La integración, por ejemplo, se van a ver las políticas de migración de la Comisión Europea, la política de integración es muy importante. ¿Cómo
sí,
poner a esas personas integradas con el resto de la sociedad para que no se críe, también para que no se críe oportunidad para desarrollo de organizaciones criminosas que después van a ser explotadas por esas otras
esas
mayores?
grandes. Y ya para cerrar, que ya se nos acabó el tiempo, es solamente a Noelia que si existe una estrategia europea para promocionar la economía azul.
Sí, claro que sí. Sí, DG Mare es la entidad, la Dirección General de Mar y Pescas es la entidad que tiene la responsabilidad de promover y desarrollar la economía azul y tienen estrategias y planes y programas y un montón de cosas. Se pueden consultar online.
Muchísimas gracias, Sergio, por tu tiempo. Ha sido un honor una vez más tenerte aquí
Ha sido un placer.
y bueno, nos quedan muchas preguntas más, nos quedan interrogantes, pero lo más importante, nos queda un gran aprendizaje. Y como siempre aquí hay un tema tanto de estrategia como de seguridad, como de recursos, y
Sí,
son esos tres pilares que al final nos mueven las decisiones, ¿no?
muy bien,
Así
sí.
que en nombre de TecnoCampus, en nombre de la Cátedra de Economía Azul, Logística y Movilidad Sostenible, en nombre de los estudiantes de cuarto curso, sobre todo, lo más importante son ellos, que nuestro futuro está en sus manos. Agradecemos tu presencia. Un
No,
saludo
para
muy
mí ha
cordial.
sido un honor una vez más y quiero agradecerte a ti por la invitación, que es muy importante para mí, es un reconocimiento y te lo agradezco. Y para los alumnos les deseo lo mejor para sus vidas profesionales y espero tener contribuido con una gotita de conocimiento en todo ese proceso y que les sirva cuando sus vidas sean menos académicas y más profesionales.
Seguro que sí. A partir de ahora les viene el trabajo final de grado, así que ya tienen más ideas si quieren